So I guess what I'm wondering is like, okay, so you made this statement. So I'm just trying to understand, like, you're saying that this is kind of like like we want to do this because we think it's cool, and
it was more just like there's just this part of this presentation where I'm just kind of, this is more feedback than like,
okay,
where I'm just kind of like seeing all these reasons that it's better than Rails. And kind of in the back of my head, the thought process was, I like Haskell, I want to write web pages, I'm sold. Like that was.
Okay.
Okay.
Simon?
Yeah, kind of similar feedback. It's a lot. There's a couple of slides, not a lot, but a couple of slides devoted to. I lost the word, but
Pairing with Rails.
using Rails, basically. No, it's I guess trying to sell Haskell versus Rails, and I guess this will grow in power as we get more real life examples of why it has rocks, and then showing actual numbers and code and all that, which it's kind of early days for that.
Quite. Although, I mean, it's 4 years in, so it's kind of like a.
I can say, I mean, one experience I had, which is great to show, is with a couple of lines of code, you can build a pretty solid, high-performing web server into your app, which can't do with Rails or most of the frameworks. So HAppS, I think one of its strengths is also kind of its flexibility, that you can use it, mix and match parts of it. And I guess the strengths of Haskell, you said, early, I guess a sort of feedback point. You mentioned the very concise short code, which I agree with. I'd love to add two more, which are it's known for its type safety and ability to write really solid code with it, more easily than Rails perhaps. I mean, some would argue that, but I think it's true. And the second is that it's really fast.
It's a compiled language, right?
Yeah.
Rails is interpreted. Most of these web frameworks are actually interpreted languages.
soon we'll compile to bytecode technically, and we've reached that.
Actually, Ruby isn't there yet. Or it might be. But what I was going to say though is that perhaps a better comparison would be to something like CSI, which is people are looking at because it's the best tool, or a lot of people think it's the best tool for the job.
What is CSI?
CSI.
Oh, Seaside, right. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's also about the same maturity. And
problem is I don't know Seaside, so I couldn't talk about it. It's a very good feedback. Okay.
Well, I have a couple questions. The first question is about having everything in memory, and sort of saying, well, you know, one isn't hitting the database and reforming the same query over and over again at a high traffic point. But scalability to me also says that if your database, I mean all the stuff that is in scope in your application is large, I don't see as how that actually ends up being scalable, because you're limited to how much you can actually sort of shove in your memory, which is not necessarily that large, or if you're really talking about something that gets a lot of activity, or say something where people are coming in and maybe making like blog comments every day. So every day the active domain continues to grow. At some point, I think you're going to not be able to keep everything in memory. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Let me go to my other point,
okay,
which is that I have a lot of experience with JSP, and so I know it's a real nuisance to you got to do the thing to get it in and out of the database. You got to do the thing to get it in and out of the web page. Blah 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 blah. It's real tedious stuff. But I would love to see an example of what does the deployment look like when you've got one of these things running. Is there a way, like in JSP, where under web apps you have separate folders for separate sort of web page groups? Is there something similar in Happstack? I'd be kind of interested to sort of see a little bit more about the practical thing of what does it look like when you've got something, when you're starting with something, and this is what it looks like when it gets to be the end.
You know, there's such a small crowd here that we could almost just kind of crowd around. We could do a little bit of that. We were going to try to do a demo of Happstack. The problem is, typically when you're going to show slides, it's easy to show slides on Linux. On Windows. And Happstack is mostly being used in Linux right now.
If you want, there's a lab downstairs we can repurpose temporarily.
Well, if you want, I've got.
You know, but I think the point is we kind of looked at it and we were like, oops, this one thing doesn't work. We'll just we won't do too much actual demo with the computer because it's not working that well on Windows. But like it's like it actually did work when we changed one line and coded it again. We could probably do that like after we finish the slides.
I like your first point. That's a good point, and I'll address that. But your question that you posed about seeing something, what this looks like in reality. In the next release, I've already kind of started working on the tool. It's still kind of in its infancy, but basically it's going to be like Rails in the sense that you can type in Happstack, new project, blah, put a directory there, and then it populates kind of like a basic skeleton, and so you can see like what something like this might look like. It's not ready yet.
Have you used Rails, by the way, or just JSP?
I've done so little with Rails.
But you understand the skeleton
first 30
concept, right?
pages of some introduction to Rails book, in that sense.
Rails gives you a way to have an app up and running in seconds because you give this command and it gives you a skeleton of an app, and that's something a lot of people seem to like.
So. Yeah, and I would like it, but I've also sort of heard that Rails, because it doesn't really, not that it's really my problem, but it doesn't scale. So I don't want to walk away from something and then hear that it blew up on somebody.
I think there's two parts to that. First is you need a lot of blog posts if you're going to fill up 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is basically like the most you can get like on one computer. Obviously, for big apps, there's going to be more than 16 gigs. And the solution there, if you want to get things working in HAppS, is something called sharding, where you take your state and you split it on some unique value, some unique thing, which can like be reasonably. You basically split up all your state along different computers. So if you're Facebook, then you would say like, well, we're going to take all the last names to start with some letter, and they'll be on one computer, and split things up like that. And then there can be a way that you can do most of the things that you want to do.
It's something that large databases already support, sharding. Where you're basically partitioning your data to be on multiple things because your database has gotten so huge that you have to do that at some point.
And where is sharding with HAppS now?
Yeah, sharding. So sharding support is something that was planned, that one of the developers was working on. It's not quite ready yet, and that's something I hope to remedy probably in not this release, but hopefully the next release. But right now, there is already experimental support for what's called multi-master, which doesn't address the scalability problem, but multi-master allows you to have high availability. So you basically have two applications that automatically tell each other what's going on as far as the state. So if one drops off the map, you still got your other one running right here, behind some load balancer, ideally with how you do most HTTP high availability kind of setups.
So is it that a philosophy of the project that we just don't want to deal with databases in some ways?
No. Well, yes and no. I think that answer is different for different people because on the one hand, yeah, you can be a lot more productive because you don't have to deal with all this other craft in between. But then if you run into scalability nightmares in the future, there's two types of scalability you really got to break down here. One is like sheer performance scalability as far as like how fast can we hammer this thing and how many pages can be served up. And that's really what this solves. If you're talking about scalability as far as like sheer volume of data that you want to store, this is definitely not the right solution because last time I checked, RAM is way more expensive than hard disk. So I think it really just depends on what you're storing. Like for a lot of web apps, it's a lot of like text.
But of course, you don't have to keep all of your state in RAM either.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You can do both.
Like for example, get it as like a